This one is why Phoenix Wright is at his best in Apollo Justice. Cole, the fat guy. Let's see what he says. 25 minutes, 52 seconds. Up to Dual Destinies. Yep, so I've played all those. So, spoiler warning for everyone.
Thought that you had any idea what I'd cover from one video to the next, this. Over the last year, I've gotten really into the Ace Attorney franchise. Last year, I went through the original trilogy, and this year, I've been slowly but surely hammering away at the sequel trilogy. Now, the general opinions on the OG trilogy are pretty set in stone. First is good, second is mixed with a great finale, and the third closes it out really well. The sequels, nowadays known as the Apollo Justice trilogy, are a lot more polarizing and opinions are a lot more varied. The main culprit of that polarization being the original Apollo Justice game itself. Hell, we're over 15 years out from this game's release, and I still hear people shouting from both sides that the game is either great or horrible. I'd call it a black sheep, but for one, it's not that unanimously hated, and two, there's like 3 games I could also call that in this series, so that wouldn't narrow it down at all. But what exactly is that? Well, for one, I'm sure part of it could honestly be the same issue that people had 17 years ago. That being the new guy. Phoenix isn't the main character. The cast is almost entirely new, and after 3 games of familiar faces and an overarching story, seeing a new cast and a much more worn down Phoenix was really surprising for a lot of people, and not in a good way. Another reason, which I would say is more understandable, but not as much talked about, is the inconsistency in trial quality and just overall pacing. The game starts amazing, continues with a decent case, flatlines a little bit, and then rises back up. Now, this isn't even close to the only game.
Yeah, the Lemurard case sort of felt disconnected from the others for an overall arcing plot
in the series to do that. But when you're introducing a new protagonist, inconsistent trial quality can hamper the reaction. But one of the biggest issues people have is the handling of the old protagonist, Phoenix Wright. And hell, a lot of other issues people have can lead back to the issues they may have had with Phoenix. Phoenix in this game, on the outset, makes a massive impression if you've played the other games. The bright-eyed, bold man from the originals is now disheveled, quiet, and honestly, kind of sinister at times. He's been disbarred, he doesn't really seem to have a lot of belief in others anymore, and he's incredibly cynical during the trial, even passing you forged evidence. And he's got a daughter now? What? That's a huge bomb to drop, especially since we're already trying to get into the shoes of a new lawyer. In the last game, Phoenix was on top of the world, saving his friends time after time, forming close bonds with other members of the law, and giving peace and closure to the most attractive and incredible man I've ever met. But the question starts as, what happened to our boy? And while that question is answered, a lot of people aren't satisfied with the answer, or how the answer is even given. They think that Phoenix is not only out of character, but the way it's explained doesn't make enough sense or is just stupid. And that in explaining all of it, the limelight is completely robbed from Apollo, our main character. I had heard a lot of this before playing, and a lot of it after. I tried to temper my expectations, as I wanted to engage with it while also not getting too upset if I didn't like what I played.
Yeah, I'm just playing and seeing how it goes with the whole thing, because I don't know how it's going to turn out. I haven't spoiled myself, so I'm just seeing how it is. But I quite enjoyed Apollo Justice, but I think that if it went on for longer than one game with Apollo Justice, it depends a lot on how they would have done it. But yeah, we'll see what he says.
Well, what happened was, this became my second favorite game in the series. And if I'm being honest, I think Phoenix has not only done well, but he's at his best here. Now, we're going to be tackling this by doing a mix of going through different arguments against Phoenix in this game, while also analyzing big moments for his character. And hopefully by the end, I'll have made myself clear on why I love this characterization for him. But first, a very quick rundown of what exactly Phoenix Wright is in this game. Phoenix in this game is introduced through being accused of murder, because if you exist in this universe, you're either a murderer or someone's going to accuse you of being one. And here, he's not only extremely closed off, but incredibly shady, being more than willing to forge evidence to get Apollo's mentor, Christoph Gavin, behind bars. Phoenix also now has an adopted daughter, Trucy, who is part of an overcomplicated lineage known as the Gramarye family. Phoenix, after this, throughout the game, is incredibly secretive, putting together a test for a new legal system known as the Juris system.
So part of the issue I'm having with after Apollo Justice is we're not seeing the Juris system. I haven't played the investigations and that, but that is in between the trilogies. So playing through Dual Destinies, they seem to just forget about the Juris system. And that's something I'm looking for, maybe trying to find an explanation for in any of the games as I play through. I'm going to just be like, okay, I'll keep an eye out for that. Because he tested it, it seemed to work out or not. We'll see, but then there's time passes and then the jury system isn't there anymore.
As Apollo takes cases, Phoenix helps him along with advising him how the new legal system should work. Phoenix leaps for the opportunity to then use the new system as a case from right before he was disbarred comes back into relevancy, as one of the people who forged the evidence he was tricked into using has died. Phoenix uses the new jury system to put Kristoff behind even more bars, as he believes the current legal system can't work as long as people like Kristoff have sway. During this time, he makes peace with Trucy's family, who this video is not about, but suffice to say, they take up a good chunk of the final case, and their relationship to Phoenix, Trucy, and Apollo are truly fascinating and complicated, and I can't cover both that family and Phoenix in the same video. But yes, in the end, I would describe Phoenix in this game as secretive, a weirdly conniving person, and not at all the bluffing, bright-eyed person we knew, right? Well, yes, but that's not entirely the case. And that's what I'm going to get into right now. First off, is this version of Phoenix out of character from how we knew him in the original trilogy? After all, we were in his shoes. We should know him more than anyone. He was a big dork, constantly bluffing his way through things, but always deeply trusting others even to a fault. Yet here, he's insanely conniving, constantly plotting in the background, never showing his full hand, doing underhanded things to get his way, such as passing Apollo forged evidence or recording people without their consent. Sure, he clearly loves Trucy, and Trucy loves him, and he still keeps stable friendships. But what happened to the kind, funny guy we knew in the original games? Well, in my opinion, this version of Phoenix makes perfect sense. First off, it's been 7 years, and Phoenix just isn't the same person anymore. He's still got a lot of his same qualities. After all, he still uses bluffing skills to become a professional poker player. Yeah. And he still has that same belief in others. It's just now, instead of in clients, it's towards Apollo. But obviously, those aren't the parts people have an issue with. It's the weirdly closed-off mannerisms, the fact he never tells you anything while also being so nonchalant about either the actual wrongs he's committing or the lack of information he gives to Apollo. And hell, even despite truly believing in him, Phoenix spends most of the game using Apollo as a pawn in this massive game he's playing with Kristoff Gavin. You don't realize it until near the end, but the second Phoenix saw Apollo doing his job, Apollo was instantly roped into Phoenix's schemes without even knowing it. The reason you take the second case was because Phoenix got you roped into finding about the events of the night before, and also why he was hit by a car. In the third case, he's pushing Apollo to figure out how to trigger someone into confessing and push them to their limits until they have no choice but to out themselves. And all of that is to prepare Apollo for that final case. As throughout the game, Phoenix is in talks with people behind the scenes to prepare the juris system, something he's using specifically to get this one person's crimes completely laid bare. A lot of people see this, how closed off he is, how cold he can be towards others, how he uses Apollo, and how he does all of it for a massive master plan that has no room for error to be completely out of character for Phoenix Wright. And while I kind of see it, I wholeheartedly disagree. I want you to think back to the earlier games and really pay attention to how Phoenix interacts with others. I think people don't realize it because we're in his shoes. We see his inner thoughts and we know how he feels about others along with his history. But if you look at how he expresses himself to others, no matter how close he is with them, he's always holding himself back. Mia Fey was his mentor for presumably a while, from before he passed the bar to his first case. It's never explained exactly how long, but we can assume it was for at least a year, and yet she barely knew anything about him personally. She points out as much. She had no idea Larry was Phoenix's friend until the day of the trial. She didn't know how they were friends. She didn't even know why Phoenix was a lawyer. Later on with Maya, it's the same way. It takes him multiple months to open up to her about why he's a lawyer or any of his history. Then over a year later, as they're still very close friends, with Phoenix defending her in court twice and them constantly spending their free time together, she never knew that Edgeworth was currently MIA, possibly dead until trial 3. Edgeworth was missing for nearly a year, and yet his only response when Maya finally asks where he is, "Don't mention him to me again. I don't want to talk about it." When Francisca accuses him of causing Edgeworth's quote-unquote death instead of defending himself, he basically tells her just to shut up. And when Edgeworth does come back, he doesn't even open up to him about how him dipping made him feel. He just responds the same way he did with Francisca. Hell, that's why him being able to trust Edgeworth with information regarding the case and Maya is a big deal. Not just because Phoenix has realized he can trust someone who he used to butt heads with, but because he can open up to someone at all. And arguably, most of all, The shit with Dahlia Hawthorne. Almost the entire third game is about Phoenix's relationship to this girl. It's why Mia became his mentor. It's a case that started Edgeworth's career, and it is incredibly important to just about all of the Faye family drama at the center of the overarching plot, and yet Phoenix never told Maya about his relationship with her. He doesn't tell her the reason he wants to go to the temple is because a girl there looks like Dahlia, or about the case that had him almost in jail before he was ever a lawyer. Hell, this gets pointed out by Edgeworth. When Phoenix meets him at the temple, he wants to know about why all of it is so personal to him. What was his history with Iris, and he
Edgeworth can see it.
Actively upsets Edgeworth, and he even points out how
I never really thought about back at it, looking at it in a retrospective from Apollo Justice before, and it makes so much sense, right? And I think that's what made me feel like I was so connected to these characters, because you spend so much time with them, you see the interior thoughts, but then also they end up going through an arc of where he doesn't open up to them until the overarching arc comes around near the end of the game, and that's what makes Edgeworth's eventual return and redemption so good.
how closed off Phoenix always is, which is not healthy for their relationship. Phoenix, you gotta be communicative with your boyfriend. All of this to say, this isn't out of the ordinary for Phoenix. This is just the first time we don't get to read his mind after he shuts someone down. This is the first time we have to see Phoenix from the outside. What I like about this is that Phoenix isn't always in mystery mode like he is in the first case. In case 2 especially, he's very casual, simply watching TV in the hospital. Yet we still get that frustration of never being told anything. This man was hit by a car, yet instead of consoling anyone or explaining what happens, he basically just goes, "Go find the noodle cart and also figure out which car hit me, thanks." There's no malice in it, no trying to be secretive or rude. That's just how he is. And when I got to this part, I thought, this was definitely how he talked to Edgeworth when he was in the hospital in Bridge to the Turnabout. Edgeworth basically says as much. Phoenix deeply cares for others. We see it here too, as Phoenix, right after getting disbarred, is more than willing to care for this 8-year-old that was basically left on his doorstep. It's just on the opposite end, Phoenix tends to have trouble opening up and being cared for. I guess it makes sense for his current occupation, as he keeps his cards close to his chest. He doesn't want to let anyone in, and he's very good at keeping them out. It's just now we're the ones who have to deal with it instead of being in his shoes. I think this is also added onto in Dual Destinies. Phoenix in that game has no secret plans, no underhanded schemes. He's just a lawyer again, yet Apollo can never get a read on him and is eventually pushed to his limit by it, feeling completely used, despite Phoenix legitimately liking Apollo.
Okay, slight spoilers, but that's okay.
Speaking of underhanded plans and secrets,
there's nothing major there, at least for stuff I haven't played yet. This was 23rd of November 2024. I was just checking when he made this.
Let's get into that next. How could Phoenix Wright, of all characters, come up with a plan as complicated and insane as the one he used to take down Kristoff? Phoenix is known as a massive bluffer. He flies by the seat of his pants, and the only rule he runs by is believing in his client. And to that end, he bluffs constantly, pushing and pushing until the truth eventually comes out. But here, his plans are so insane that he perfectly ensnares this criminal genius just because he got disbarred by him. Except that's not really the case. In a reductive sense, sure, but that's not what happens. What Phoenix is doing most of those 7 years is just gathering small bits of evidence. He can't really get his badge back at that point, as the corruption of the legal system wouldn't let him. And at the core of that is Kristoff Gavin, the person who got him disbarred. Also, yes, I know Kristoff voted for him to keep his badge, but for one, he was the one who gave the forged evidence to Phoenix in a roundabout way. And two, it's heavily implied he controls a ton of the court simply through the immense respect that people have for him. You don't...
And you can tell, especially when he breaks down on that he's the one that manipulated it. Him voting for Phoenix to keep his attorney's badge was probably also for show. It's like, oh yeah, I didn't do that because I voted for you, type thing.
Get this as your prison cell without that. Another thing is that he couldn't have bluffed his way through this. It was too tall of a mountain. Phoenix bluffs and goes by the seat of his pants, yes, but that doesn't mean he's stupid. He's very smart, and if he didn't have only 2 days of prep work per case, he probably wouldn't need to bluff like he does.
Yeah,
but here he's able
2 days of prep work, like that's crazy.
Study and learn about everything surrounding the disbarment.
Especially when you think of like the time when he was disbarred. He only had that morning or that night to be able to prep for the case. That's crazy.
The ones who forged the evidence, how deep Kristoff's corruption goes, the Gramarye family, and eventually he's able to form a plan to take Kristoff down once the time is right. Or should I say, once the time is Wright.
Okay.
That time being when the first trial starts. See, in the situation Phoenix is in, he can't do much besides slowly get evidence while working his job at the Borscht Bull Club. Because in terms of law, Christoph Gavin is unshakable. He's the most respected person in the field, and though Phoenix has taken down corrupt officials in the law, Christoph pounced on Phoenix first. And Phoenix not only had to both gather evidence outside of the law, while also figuring out why Christoph would do what he did, but he also needs a few specific things to happen. One, he needs Christoph to slip up. Maybe he'll pass off obviously forged evidence to his brother. Maybe he'll screw over another lawyer and that'll allow them to join forces, or maybe he'll just outright commit a murder. This was Phoenix's in, which worked in his favor even more as he was the one accused of the murder. You can tell Phoenix is...
It works so well because he was just waiting for his time, biding his time. He's like, alright. He's gathered what evidence he could, as shown by the Mason system part, and then biding his time to go, okay, we have Apollo, who I's come in and I can be able to use him to be able to enact my plan. And yeah, like he's saying, you can get through to him this way.
He hires him after figuring out what already happened. And he knows that Christoph is going to try to pass the blame onto someone else. But Phoenix got another big step of his plan completed when he meets Apollo Justice, a bright-eyed, inexperienced defense attorney with unwavering faith in his clients. We'll get into this in a minute, but as much as people like to say Phoenix hijacks this game from Apollo, I disagree. I think Apollo is insanely necessary for this, as while yes, Phoenix's plan is the main focus of Case 4, the final bits of Phoenix's plan can't come together without someone like Apollo. And that's why the first trial plays out like it does. Phoenix sees Apollo as a younger him, and both begins to nurture that, but also take advantage of it. He encourages Apollo to figure out the story for himself, while also passing him forged evidence to win the case. Phoenix does want to help Apollo become a lawyer that the current system needs, but he also needs Christoph Gavin in jail before that can happen. But let's look into that relationship now. And let's see if Apollo really is sidelined during Turnabout Succession. Turnabout Succession is...
Yeah, I don't think he really is. You can see how much, like, we're playing as Apollo, and we go through the investigation and stuff, and you always play as a defense attorney in the Ace Attorney games, so that's the lens that we look through. And we're looking through his perspective, which is quite different to, but also similar in some ways to Phoenix's perspective. It's
about
cool.
A lot of things. It's about Phoenix's history, how he was disbarred, and how he adopted his daughter Trucy.
But also, we care so much about Phoenix from the original games that if there was hardly any of Phoenix and, oh, what's he been doing the last 7 years and all that, it'd be like, well, okay, where's the answer to all that?
About the troubled history of the Grimari family, and it's about Apollo bringing about the future of the legal system. And arguably most of all, it's about Christoph Gavin's fall. Phoenix is the main orchestrator of it, as he plans a new court system, the Juris system, in order to get Christoph to go from jail to super jail. If you didn't notice, Apollo really wasn't mentioned in that. So that immediately proves the naysayers correct, right? Not really. Being reductive does make it seem like Apollo isn't involved, but I don't think that that's the case, and here's why. Turnabout Succession and Wright's entire plan would not have worked if he didn't have Apollo. See, in the original Ace Attorney games, Phoenix is an outlier. He doesn't use underhanded tactics, he doesn't cheat, he simply pushes to prove people innocent, and if they're guilty, wants them brought to justice. It's through him that the legal system changes positively. We see it in Edgeworth, how he fully begins to care about only the truth, not winning. We see it in Franziska von Karma, as winning every trial stops being her main goal. We see it in Damon Gant, as he admits that as long as people like Phoenix and Miles exist, the legal system could be in safe hands. And we see it in Godot, as he and his incredibly handsome face realize that the future of the law resides in people like Phoenix. However, Phoenix is no longer a lawyer here. He's still involved with the legal system, which we will get to, but he isn't fighting for clients anymore, and instead, people are looking up to men like Christoph, who cheats constantly in order to get his verdicts, not caring about the actual truth. That's why Apollo is Phoenix's spark to fully put his plan into motion. If Phoenix just put Christoph behind bars, that's one thing, but it doesn't fix the system or set it on the right path.
And he wouldn't have been able to because he was disbarred. He wouldn't be able to act as a defense attorney. And the whole reason why Apollo was needed was because there needed to be a defense attorney that would fight for the truth. Rather than it being, oh, Phoenix Wright appeared? Wait, no, he can't defend himself. He was disbarred. We're not going to trust any of his evidence. None of it's permitted in court.
Upon meeting Apollo, a lawyer just like he was, focused on the truth and believing in his clients, passionate enough that he'll outright punch Phoenix in the face for giving him false evidence, that Phoenix sees the future of the law. When Apollo is in court, he's loud, he's bombastic.
Yeah, and literally it says it's your story from here on out.
And he's constantly taking pieces of each crime, putting them together, helped by his incredible ability to read people. Most others in his current field would use those abilities to guarantee constant wins using underhanded tactics, but Apollo refuses to. Across from Apollo is Clavier Gavin, someone who, yes, played a part in Phoenix getting disbarred, but not for any petty reasons or because of a hatred for attorneys, but because he holds the law in incredibly high esteem. His goal, similar to Phoenix and Edgeworth, is the truth. You can see it from second one. Clavier, while obviously cocky and more than willing to make jokes at Apollo's expense, is also more than willing to work together with Apollo to solve the murders and get actual perpetrators behind bars. He pushes Apollo to be better and appreciates that Apollo pushes him back.
Yeah.
This dynamic is similar to the one Phoenix and Edgeworth have. While it's not exactly the same, as Clavier doesn't have Edgeworth's original obsession with winning, and Apollo cracks down on people a lot more than Phoenix ever did, along with being a much more outspoken person. But it's their pursuit of the truth that makes Phoenix willing to entrust his plans to them.
I think that's what I like about, like, Clavier is good. I prefer Edgeworth because we have gone through the arc of him wanting to win and then coming around to wanting the truth. I like the character arc scene, but Clavier is good in Apollo Justice to serve as the other person seeking the truth. He's like the type of prosecutor that you want in Ace Attorney, at least. That both of you want the truth and you're just trying to get to it through the court system.
Knows he isn't in a position to put Kristoff and what he represents away fully, but he sees two people who easily could. Apollo also isn't a bystander here, where in the first trial he needs Phoenix's help. Here he is in control, pushing Clavier to aid him to get the truth out about both Vera Misham and Kristoff. And it's Apollo that fully understands his mission. It's not to get Kristoff to fully confess, it's to get the jury to declare him guilty. There isn't evidence enough to fully pin everything on Kristoff, so Apollo uses what he has in order to break him down and make him admit enough of what he's done to get a verdict. Phoenix needs Apollo because Apollo not only represents a bright future of the law, but also because he's the only person who can fully see through and break down all of the bullshit that's bogged down the system since Phoenix's disbarment. Speaking of which, I would like to cover that next. A lot of people will say Phoenix's disbarment makes no sense in the context of Ace Attorney's world. After all, we've seen forged evidence before, and at most, it got Von Karma a penalty and Edgeworth, I don't know, some kind of severe punishment. Maybe he got spanked by the judge or something. But for Phoenix, he's disbarred. He loses the case and loses his job along with it. How is this fair at all? It's not. In fact, it's ridiculous it happened at all. Which is why, to me, it works. Phoenix reasonably shouldn't have gotten disbarred, yet somehow he still did. Where were his allies in the legal system? Where was Edgeworth, Franziska, anyone? Well, this is going to get a bit headcanon-y, so I ask you to bear with me.
Okay,
Here's my answer. Phoenix is disbarred.
It is very notable how much of them are missing in the story of his disbarment.
Was almost entirely unfair. Yes, but that's the point. Kristoff may have pushed for a lighter penalty during the actual hearing, but considering he was basically in control of the department at the time, I highly doubt he didn't sway opinions behind Phoenix's back. After all, his goal was to get Phoenix disbarred, as Phoenix took a case he was aiming to take himself. That was Kristoff's forged evidence, and if he couldn't have that case, nobody could. Kristoff saw Phoenix taking the Grimari case as him losing a chance at recognition and fame, so he was going to make Phoenix infamous instead. Everything that Kristoff does spawns from pettiness. He murders Zach Grimari all those years later out of that same pettiness. And hell, he was not only willing to forge evidence for an easy win, but also was willing to poison and kill two people just because he had gotten all they were worth and didn't want them squealing on it. The thing that matters most to him is his image. So to not have a case he felt was rightfully his, he wanted Phoenix gone. But his appearance still mattered to him, so he had to pretend he respected Phoenix and defended him despite more than likely turning everyone against him. And that's also why Phoenix's plan is what it is. A lot of people wonder, why not talk to Edgeworth, the judge, anyone who he has connections with in order to get his badge back? I mean, hell, he does just that after the game, so why didn't he before? Well, because, again, of Kristoff Gavin and what he represents. A little bit of headcanon again. But I don't think people like Edgeworth wouldn't question what happened to Phoenix and why he got disbarred. And he'd probably prep a team to get him rebarred. But I personally believe Phoenix would have refused. Again, Phoenix doesn't like getting help from others if he can do something himself. And this...
Well, I'll let him finish
was
his
too
explanation.
personal and too important to fail. After all, this wasn't even just about Phoenix. This was about his new daughter and about the legal system itself. He couldn't return to law if Kristoff was still there, so he has to bide his time. Now, you might also think, well, that's really stupid.
And I think it's like, okay, he also saw that if he went back in, then if something happened with Kristoff again, it'd just happen the same. And I would say almost like his disbarment probably also gave him time to reflect on the law system. What happened to get him to that point? What happened to get him disbarred? What are the flaws in the system? And then try to come up with a plan to make it better over time, of course.
That's really petty that he would focus 7 years on taking down this one guy. And I would say, yeah, kinda. But you have to understand, this is the game he's playing. The entire reason he lost his job is due to this horribly petty action from this horribly petty man. So he can't just do what he always does. He has to play that same game. It's why he wants to use the juris system. His goal is for Kristoff's facade to finally fall, and for everyone to see him for what he is. Again, Kristoff's identity is everything to him. When asked about why he murdered Zach, his response is just, I killed a man named Smith with a bottle because I am an evil human being. He wouldn't show any weakness until Phoenix's recordings and Apollo and Clavier's pressing finally caused him to crack. It had to be done this way. And even if he was in normal jail, Kristoff still had that sway over others and the respect of the law. He had to be dragged out kicking and screaming for the damage he'd done to finally be seen. And Phoenix needed people like Apollo in order to get it done. I also don't think he was abandoned by others in the law. I don't think he abandoned them either. To get the juris system, he pulled a lot of strings and set it up. If he wasn't still respected by his peers like Edgeworth, he wouldn't have gotten that chance at all. I don't think it's unrealistic that Phoenix did get the opportunity to help build the juris system, as again, he has a lot of friends in the law. And for another reason, the main person who convinced others to disbar him was found guilty for murder. I'd assume he'd start getting second chances because of that, especially since Phoenix doesn't start working on building the juris system until after Kristoff is behind bars already. But the goal wasn't just...
Yeah, because he would have seen that Kristoff would have stopped that from happening. It would have gotten in his way and stopped him from instituting it.
To get his badge back. It was to expose both Kristoff and the flaws within the legal system, which Phoenix does, leading into the plot of Dual Destinies with the Dark Age of the Law. Another complaint about this game is that the most important stuff has to do with Phoenix, and that is true, but personally I don't mind it. It's still Apollo's story. It's Apollo's story of him getting roped into Phoenix's story and mess, and him being the one to bring it to an end. He matters because despite a lot of these problems not being his, he's up to the task of cleaning them up. Similar to how in the first game, Phoenix is helping to clean up the problems of Edgeworth and Manfred von Karma, here it's Apollo who needs to end the nightmare created by Christoph Gavin while also proving to Phoenix the law has a future, which again is continued in future games, as Apollo is still a major character, now working as a colleague of Wright's, not a pawn or an apprentice. And I want to circle back to how Phoenix is still very much in character with his relationships to other people. We've already gone over Apollo, how Phoenix puts his trust in him despite using him for his own gains. But there's also Trucy, the game's main supporting character, and we see that deep down, Phoenix is still the same as he always was. Despite losing his job and having an 8-year-old left behind for him to raise, he does it immediately, seeing her as this shining spark of hope in the nightmare he's living through. From day one, you can see how much Phoenix cares about Trucy and puts even more effort into caring for her.
Yeah, it's really sweet.
His revenge. Even going the extra mile and getting her last name changed to Wright. We spend so much time with Trucy, and during that time, we see just how much she loves Phoenix. And even knowing that her real dad ran away and that she can never see him again, she's okay because she sees Phoenix as her real father. Even if we only get a handful of scenes with them together, we know that despite him being closed off, Phoenix is still that same trusting, caring man for those around him as he ever was. Despite the Grimoires ditching Trucy like they did, Phoenix still gives as much care and trust as he can to the surviving Grimoires, despite it partially being due to them that he lost his badge. He wants the best for his daughter, and to that end is cordial with her family, and in the end, encourages Lamiwar, the mother of both Apollo and Trucy, to eventually meet them. Phoenix is still caring. He still has positive...
I still haven't seen that. I want, like, some of the plot threads, that's I think the biggest problem is I'm finding as I go into Dual Destinies, is some of those plot threads don't seem to have been taken anywhere for some closure.
relationships, even if we never get a full...
Which is nice, because maybe in some ways it's not relevant, and maybe we'll see some things later, but still I'm like, I want to know what happened there.
Whole scene of Edgeworth popping in to say, Phoenix, what are you doing?
Crack? What the fuck?
Through all of this, my point is, not only is Phoenix in character in this game, but he's used exceptionally well. We get a taste of what it's like to know Phoenix when not in his shoes. We see he's generally caring and kind while also being very closed off about both how he's feeling and what he's planning. Apollo is who he sees as the future of his profession. He's not exactly like Phoenix, but his belief in his clients and passion for defending them pushes Phoenix's plan into motion. I don't mind that Phoenix gets his badge back in Dual Destinies either, because he's not the entire focus of the game. He's a major player, yes, but I still feel like you can call Apollo the protagonist and not be wrong, as it's still an exploration of how he feels, whether it be towards Phoenix or his other colleagues.
That's probably also like Dual Destinies is the whole thing of it, right? So you don't need to particularly follow one protagonist the whole time, you're following a couple.
Phoenix also doesn't just forget his experience in this game. He's still the same person he always was, but he keeps that more mature attitude, that faith in the future, and that critical nature when it comes to the law. Not every change made in this game stuck, but in terms of Phoenix's characterization, not only has it stuck, but it was also a natural evolution of what came before it, whether it is in this game where he's in that shitty hoodie, or in the future where he dons his uniform again. I love Apollo Justice Ace Attorney. As I said, it's my second favorite game in the series, and Apollo might be my favorite protagonist out of the bunch, but it's Phoenix who truly brings it all together. It was an incredibly bold decision to make the previous protagonist a supporting character, especially after he was riding up.
Oh, at the end of the Apollo Justice trilogy, and when I play the investigation games and things, that'll be interesting to see which I actually view as my favorite.
High at the end of the last game, and now he looks like, well, this. But it makes
he plays the mentor figure in this. Like, Gandalf is the mentor figure in Lord of the Rings a lot of the time. He's the mentor figure in Apollo Justice, while being very important to the plot. He's not the main character and provides a lot of the things that Apollo needs to be able to become who he becomes by the end.
Sense for his character. He's not hopeless or uncaring, but we see his reserved nature from the outside for once. And it works so well for just about every character's arc, from Apollo to Trucy to even Clavier. Phoenix is different here, but not in a way that feels unnatural, and I absolutely love it. It's in this game where I feel Phoenix is at his best, where his personality has mixed with a quiet confidence that really makes you want to delve into what happened. It makes you feel what Apollo is feeling, both wanting to know what exactly happened, while also constantly seeing that character we played as before shine through. I won't say it's perfect. The way the Mason system is presented doesn't make a ton of sense in terms of actual realism, and like it or not, he absolutely fucking rigged that final jury by having someone very involved with the case be one of the deciding vote.
Yeah.
But I really don't think that matters in the grand scheme of what Case 4 does for both the series and the characters. I don't know if I fully justified why I think they nailed his character here, but hey, that's all I've really got on the subject. This video's long enough as it is. So all that's left for me to say is, I'm never coming back.
I think as well, like, a lot of it is that you can't expect him to be exactly the same character after 7 years. Or over 7 years, because he was disbarred after Trials and Tribulations. And yeah, I think he works really well as a mentor character. And that's what I'm... Like, I was like, okay, people don't like Apollo Justice as much. Like, I had heard that a little bit. But then when I was playing it, I'm going like, I'm still really enjoying this. And it is from a different perspective and all that. And like, oh, how would I rate the games at the moment? From the ones I've completed, let me just check names. So we've got Phoenix Wright, Justice for All, Trials and Tribulations, and Apollo Justice that I have played. It's really hard to say without looking at the cases. Hang on. I know that's the originals, not the trilogies, but it's the same story. I really feel like it's like all one story with a lot of the original Phoenix Wright trilogy. But there's so much that goes on that's awesome with it. Like, it's so hard to try and pick favourites. Yeah, between Apollo Justice and Dual Destinies are the investigations and spin-off game Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright. So I'm going to play the investigations at one point, but I'm not sure if I'm going to play them and then Great Ace Attorney. Because I feel like they're more connected to the Phoenix Wright story than Great Ace Attorney, so that might be a thing. But yeah, to say, I'd have to check what the cases were in each, to be honest. And I didn't even mind the circus case in a lot of cases. Oh, that's just going through other stuff. But yeah, no, I think that was a good way of talking about it. Like, I've just really enjoyed every Ace Attorney game, let's be honest, so far. Doing the voices, the ups and downs, I think what held Apollo Justice back a bit was, like, you enter into it, it's the first game introducing a new character, it's very heavy on the panty thing at the start. That's probably the biggest flaw I'd have with it. Because it's like, okay, that joke starts to overstay its welcome a bit. But every time I'll be like, oh, they're still doing that.